you said that BJJ was just a rebrand of judo, right? Can you go more into that? Because getting more context, I could kind of see where that's going, but not completely.
Sure.
So can you add more context to that?
Sure. I mean, I won't get too into like the history.
Sure.
But as far as being on,
like just the technical aspects and how they all kind of coincide with each other.
Sure. Yeah. Like being on the same branch of the same tree. I would say judo, the philosophies of takedowns in a gi and submissions and guard passing and pinning are all in judo. And I think it hasn't been till, the International Judo Federation has kind of stripped away a lot of those aspects to sportify a martial art. So it's a little bit more palatable for competition and spectators to make it more high pace. That is why judo has kind of like moved away from being like more of a fight in a way where it's like useful in fights. Sure, the throwing aspect and choking aspect and armbar aspect, but the exchanges where you could go for a throw and concede your back and wait till the referee stands you up, all those kind of like make it different than jiu-jitsu, where jiu-jitsu is like the long form conversation of these exchanges, where in judo it's a little bit of a short duration. So like the goals are very similar in judo as they are in jiu-jitsu, where you want to take them down, submit your opponent or pin your opponent by passing the guard and being in, mount, or that's tate shihogatami, or side control, which is yoko shihogatami. So all these moves have been around for a century or more within the sphere of judo that all, have within the last 40 years or so become popularized within jiu-jitsu. So, judo, Maeda, going to Brazil and utilizing the sport or the martial art of judo, which he learned from Jigoro Kano, he was able to spread that within Brazil in the Gracie family and be able to kind of like teach them the concepts that they turned into jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu specifically. So it became like this thing that kind of shifted from the centric of the core competency of being better on your feet to being better on the ground. So, which both are true in judo. You get a lot of specialists that are really good on the ground, but the modern goals for judo athletes that are in the combat sport of judo and the Olympic goals is to be as good as you can at throwing people, and then the groundwork is more of an afterthought. So I think the way judo has evolved has made it less like jiu-jitsu, but where they started in, I would say probably the 1940s and 50s, they were basically the same thing, where you had like Kosen judo, where, all of these guards, De La Hiva and Ashigarami, and these techniques that have been kind of rebranded within the sphere of modern Brazilian jiu-jitsu, all existed in judo.
Right.
So, there's nothing really new under the sun. So, but the way that, marketing and branding has pushed jiu-jitsu to be on every street corner here in Southern California, and whereas judo's more of like has a different model of like, it's more community-based, it's in Japanese cultural centers or community centers, and it's not as much of a money-making endeavor. It's harder to spread that within the US, whereas in the world, judo's much bigger than jiu-jitsu, much bigger. It's like the second largest sport in the world by active countries.
Right.
Whereas jiu-jitsu is like a handful of countries practice and have some jiu-jitsu academies in their country. So I feel like here in the US, there's a little bit of a misunderstanding of where jiu-jitsu got most of their moves and movements from. So, I'm a judoka who was pretty good at wrestling, who loves jiu-jitsu. So I understand the historical,
great way to put it.
the historical relevance of where these moves and movements came from and the origination of these martial art disciplines. So I love jiu-jitsu. I think I'm going to train that the longest, just because I'm going to be able to facilitate movements and moves with my body.
Sustainable.
Yeah, it's more sustainable of a martial arts discipline. But I do understand the relevance of where these, disciplines came from. And I think, jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, owes judo a lot as far as, how they were able to kind of extrapolate their new branch of the same tree off of, the backs of decades of judo, martial arts discipline, athletes and sensei and practitioners. So, yeah.
Yeah, so leading into that, that's perfect segue to go into how, you were wearing a white belt, and then your instructor gave you your brown belt, which you were white belt because you felt like you didn't deserve it, or was
Well,
that the
I'll go through this really quick.
Sure.
So in 2016,
Also, and can you please talk about a little bit of, your style? Because what I got the sense from the research that I did, that since you were a go in like judo, you had, I guess, a hard time when you get put into bad spots. Correct me if I'm wrong. But then, you were maybe, what I took out of it was you were more of an offensive player, and then you had a hard time getting into those like bad positions.
Yeah. So I think in 2016, I started kind of really like pursuing my ranking in jiu-jitsu. And it was kind of by happenstance where I was teaching judo class at Studio 540 at noon. And then I think one day I heard Fabio Santos. He's like one of the pioneers here in San Diego of BJJ. He started teaching at Studio 540. His gym has been around for over 30 years in San Diego. So he was going to teach 1 or 2 days a week at Studio 540 in the hour preceding my judo class. So I got there early, and I was going to wear my white belt just because, I respect him too much to just wear my judo gi and belt.
Right.
Even though for, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years, I'd go to open mat, and all the people at Studio 540 would be like, just wear your judo gi and belt. It's fine. You're like really good. It's cool. And I'd be like, okay. And it was always just open mat, so I went and I wore my white belt, and then class happened. We rolled. And then after the class, Fabio Santos gave me my purple belt. And then we talked a little bit, and he's like, well, I have a gym maybe 20 minutes from here. Maybe you should come. And so I started going 1 day a week, every Monday. And maybe 2 months later, he gave me my brown belt. So within a few months, I was a brown belt. And for the next 2 years, I would go on Mondays and I would train, and I would really try my hardest in front of him to choke and armbar and pin and pass guards and take backs and do all my judo and wrestling skills to do my best. And one day, he saw me tapping out all of his black belts all the time. And one day I asked him, I'm like, so what do I need to do? Not to earn my black belt, but to just improve. And he said something to me I'll never forget. He's like, you need to get out of position. You need to concede in a way where you have to work from being mounted, from giving up your back, from being in positions where you're nearly submitted. And, the way he said it was pretty concise in a way where I was like, oh, okay. Like I'm kind of a goer. I want to be as efficient and as quick as I can to the sub, rather than, let's find a way into bad positions against people who are bigger and stronger and have more jiu-jitsu experience than me. So, I'd kind of do my best job at acting the first 15 or 20 seconds of every round, and I would give up position.
Right.
I wouldn't just start, okay, mount me, let's go.
Yeah.
And I would work from there, and it didn't feel good because a lot of times it'd be mounted with shoulder pressure.
Right,
and then all these positions where I'm getting choked on the face, or these positions where it's like it doesn't feel good to that's why I was really kind of not wanting to go in these positions in the first place, because I have a hurt neck, knees, shoulders. So it's like putting myself in positions where I can't protect myself as well.
Yeah.
So I really did have to learn, these just primitive ways of getting out of positions that were difficult. And in wrestling and judo, you learn how to escape, but it's just not as nuanced with the gi in a way where, you have to really take one thing at a time. And I did learn a ton. And I'm glad I did, because, one of my big inspirations in that regard was watching Jeff Glover, where he would concede position so much. And I was really good at doing that in wrestling. to keep these scrambles where someone would get in deep on something in me and I could almost re-attack from there and defend and keep this thing going until I ended up on top. And I kind of liken it and relate it to that. And I'd watch Jeff Glover train or compete, and it was very similar. So I'd be able to like almost, instead of like I'm caught in a hurricane, and instead of trying to bail and get out of it, I would go towards the eye of the storm.
Right.
And that was kind of how I thought of it, where, instead of like defending in this way, I'll go with it in a way where it's easier that direction, and just kind of try and flow with things in a way where it kept the energy moving rather than a static push versus push, where there's a lot more like impetus and impact on your body. So I kind of really did get an understanding of how to go with things and go with the flow a little bit in a way where it worked better for jiu-jitsu scrambles and gi movement, where, even Fabio was like, you just are moving the whole round. Why don't you just get on top and hold people? And I'm like, that's a lot of work. I'd rather like go with what they give me and find the sub in that transition. But so once I kind of was able to get that understand it better, to get out and be able to defend and counter people from positions where I wasn't used to getting to, it wasn't long before he gave me my black belt. So I think it was just a little over 3 years. So I think I started my jiu-jitsu journey because I wanted to be a better MMA coach. I wanted to be able to be like someone for athletes that they could ask me questions as a coach in all sphere of grappling, whether it's standing or on the ground. And I had a very limited view of that from my judo experience and wrestling experience, in a way where, folk style wrestling is a great skill to have in MMA. It's how to get up from the bottom, how to keep people down on top, and all the different movements and moves to do both. And judo has arm bars and chokes. So I had a good subsection built out, but I really do think it kind of was a tip of my cap to get that last kind of straw for my jiu-jitsu black belts. And I think I fell in love with it during the period of time that I trained it in a hard way, to just to be a better coach is why I trained it. I wanted to actually be a better coach for Ronda, for Dominic Cruz, for all these athletes that I was working with, Darian Caldwell, these world champ fighters. So it really did help me along my journey.